Nepal bans social media. Gen Z storms the parliament. Madagascar youth fight over water and power. Morocco protests stadiums while hospitals rot. The revolution isn't televised. It's live streamed, memed, and stitched into the For You page. This isn't just one country's unrest. It's a generational revolt. Saudi Carbon, welcome to another episode here for the Fun Report, Mindful Media and Communication. And before we jump into today's episode, we have to quickly look at what is actually happening. So Nepal, what I said in the intro, tried to ban 26 social media platforms. Then that's what you've seen in the media probably, right? Then protests break out, they storm the parliament, the PM resigned, those people have been airlifted out with helicopters. By people, I mean the politicians. They used Discord not to vote for a new PM that has been debunked, but to discuss all those things related to it. So we have open forums, so to speak, public sphere, more on it in a second. So that was wild, right? A wild 2 weeks maybe, I'm not sure how long, but it was definitely wild to see how this all broke out and how fast it happened. Then more to the ones that you might have not heard as much of, like in Madagascar. Yeah, we had lots of rolling protests over basic infrastructure failures. Like what I said in the intro, water, power, and so on. So young people were like, hey, enough now. We see other countries doing something. We see people in other countries doing something. We're going to do something now too. We see this also in Morocco, right? The protests that they showed, there were signs saying we want hospitals, not stadiums. So they're building a new stadium because, hey, that's nice to show off, right? For big events and so on, while they don't have enough working hospitals, for example. So sign reads, we want hospitals, not stadiums, and so on. So more protests there. And there's also the one that just happened in Peru, where Gen Z also rallied over pensions and corruption. And that seems to be one of the points that all those different countries now kind of agree, people in those countries agree. We had the same thing in Indonesia, right? Where protests erupted after the parliament increased their own housing allowance by X-fold compared to what an average person in Indonesia makes. So Gen Z and others around them, but Gen Z in particular seems to be fed up with, what they perceive as, and what quite likely looks like it, or quite likely is, corruption. So now what we've seen is this is not just an isolated moment, an isolated incident, and it's not an isolated discontent. It's something that unites a generation, so to speak. It's a global template. And the second question we have to answer in this regard is, why is this happening right now? Why 2025? Why now? And I think there is something generational to it, because Gen Z has been born into instability. Climate change, climate issues, growing debt of the countries they live in without them actually doing anything about it. So there's just no way out, no way around of not feeling depressed, feeling the struggle, feeling stressed. So if you're born into this, eventually you will say, yeah, but I didn't do that. Why me? Why do I have to suffer for the BS that you are doing? And additionally, I would suggest that, Gen Z grew up with everything digital, the internet. So the internet is kind of like a normal, it's a lifeline to them. So if you take that lifeline away from a whole generation and use it as a target, we target the internet to make you shut up, to make you follow our rules, then of course they won't just let you take their lifeline. It's more important to them as you, the politicians, might think. And they will fight for it. That's what we've seen. And that's why you see that old institutions are failing, right? Because they're failing based on corruption, wrong ideas, outdated behavior, way they're handling things. And so then the youth, they fill the vacuum that's there, the vacuum in regards to communication, guidelines, and so on. They fill it with things that they know, with memes, with, fun content, and with marches. And this, the cool thing here, and cool in a sense of like interesting to see what brings all those different generations or all those different nationalities within like 1 or 2 generations together, is that there's something cross-cultural to it. And as someone who used to teach cross-cultural communication and cross-cultural courses at a uni, I find it very interesting. And a thing that we see right now actually even fits even more into like what I'm doing at uni, right, doing pop culture and so on, is the use of the One Piece, for example, the One Piece signs, signals, flags, characters, and so on. So that skull flag, for example, has been everywhere, right? And it's like this kind of protest symbol right now for this new generation, not only in Nepal, where we've seen a few pictures, but it was everywhere. It was in Peru, it was in Indonesia. It's popping up everywhere as a symbol of resistance. And that's something that my older people might laugh at, like how you're using a cartoon as a symbol. But A, it doesn't matter where it's from as long as it actually speaks to the people using it. And B, so what? You've been inspired, boomers, by, the Beatles. Let Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and whatnot be inspired by One Piece. What's so wrong about that, right? So not arguing this here in this podcast, just saying, so what? So if you want to understand why this is happening, we have to look into some media and communication theory, as we usually do here on this podcast. And I brought you 1, 2, 3, 4 different ones this time. And I will start with the ones that we know. Okay, so we know Habermas, Jürgen Habermas, who talked about the theory of the public sphere, right? So the public sphere means you have a space where the public can exchange ideas, can discuss things, can have an exchange of ideas, so to speak. Now, right now, when that public sphere is not given, when it's fractured, when it's algorithmically filtered, it's hard to really find that one place. However, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha still find spaces in that public sphere, in smaller spaces, where they can voice their dissent. Discord servers, for example. Okay, so that big idea of the public sphere is fragmented, scattered, and then if it moves online, the government tries to crack down on it. But the audience, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they still find their spaces and then use those spaces to plan their dissent. The second one, our good old friend, our guy, I will never stop making the joke, Guy Debord, who talked about the society of the spectacle, right? So if you take this idea of the society of the spectacle, that we as an audience, we embrace the spectacular, we embrace things that we didn't think about doing ourselves, and we like to see others doing it. We would like to do it, but we're not doing it, but we're looking at the spectacle and go like, wow, this is cool. Damn, wow, oh, wow. Okay, if you take this idea, right, society of the spectacle, to the protest. So the audience looks at protest not just as an act of protesting, but as an event in their feed. So it gets more attention, it gets more engagement, more likes, more clicks, more shares, more comments, more fuel, if you will. So you post it to prove that it actually happened. And so more and more people post it, more proof incoming that it's actually happening. And so it's basically the cycle that makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so society to spectacle. Nothing new. We talked about this. I brought you now 2 more theories, though, that I think also fit very well here. The first one is called the affect theory. We had it a few times, I think 2 or 3 times before on this podcast. So the affect theory says emotion is the organizing logic behind what's happening. Now, how does it make sense? Well, it says that you go through different stages of emotion, rage, hope, shame, solidarity, for example. And so this kind of emotion, if you share that with others, that will bond you, right? And it will have an effect on how groups, audiences behave. So, example, Nepal, rage, for example, brings all those people together, and then they create those protests together, for example. And the last one is called networked resistance. The first time we mentioned this on this podcast. And this suggests that power will be passed on through decentralized digital networks. And what does that mean? It means power isn't given to just one person or one entity and you're in charge of Meta, of Facebook, of Instagram. You have decentralized networks that are run on different servers, so there's no one-off switch, so to speak, and so that the power will be distributed and not centrally held. Okay, so that's also something we're seeing right now, that the new generation seems to be pursuing, saying, hey, a centralized power structure is maybe not the best idea. We should have decentralized organization. So, as I said earlier, right, the revolution isn't televised, and this revolution in particular doesn't need any big manifestos that you had like in like other revolutions before, right? It needs 20 hashtags, not as much, but it definitely needs a Discord server. And that might sound sarcastic, and it's meant to be a little bit sarcastic, but it's also meant to be full of admiration, to be honest. Okay, so it's not just an old person hating on it. I think it's incredibly interesting, and I don't say you all have to go out and demonstrate, unless you feel like you have to. So I'm not calling for it, but I do find it very interesting, very cool to see how Gen Z is using Discord servers, whatever it might be, to organize. Very, very interesting. And that said, it's not just me that thinks that, right? Because the cultural signals that come along with it, they prove that what's happening right now is bigger than just any one single protest. There's more to it. And I brought you a few examples to highlight that. Okay, so let me look at my notes and tell you what I brought. Okay, so first, what I mentioned earlier, the one piece skull flag in Nepal, Indonesia, Peru, and so on. It's a globalized, or it's a global pop culture signal, a pop cultural good, now kind of like weaponized, if you will, as a like this symbol of dissent, right? And weaponized, I don't mean this in a negative way right now. It's just like used to signal belonging between different groups. Okay. Morocco's slogan, hospitals versus stadiums, basically means they're memeing budget critique, right? Because it sounds silly, like hospitals versus stadiums. Yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer, but apparently it's not. So they're trying to exaggerate and trying to shed a light on like what's actually happening. Now I will struggle because in Madagascar, as you know, they speak French, so they call the protests Léo de l'Estage, and they're giving the thing a whole own name, like you're branding your own protest, so to speak. You're branding your own resistance. Kind of fun, kind of cool to do, kind of interesting to actually think about it, right? But hey, that's how it works right now. Okay, so this shows us, and this leads me to the last point, what happens right now when Gen Z actually keeps scaling these tactics? Because those are all tactics that maybe millennials might get, but everybody older than millennials might not really grasp what's happening. But it's tactics. And it's not just random stuff that's happening. It's all very tactical. So what happens, right? Well, what we saw happens. Governments respond with bans and censorship, but that fuels even more creative resistance. And that's what they will never understand. Yep. So protests are simultaneously local, water, pensions, and so on, but also global, shared memes, shared symbols, and so on. And again, I think that's something that an older, I was about to say audience, but in this case not an audience, but an older demographic might not quite understand. It can be both local and global. It cannot just be, oh, it's just happening here. No, everybody else will know about it and will find resemblance, will find a connection with it. Okay? And, you always hear, oh, the young people don't care. Totally not true. The youth are everything but apolitical. They're just post-traditional political. They're not political in a sense that boomers were political, in Gen X and whatnot, but they are political. And I think that's something that we have to understand. So what you, and by you right now, I mean the politicians in charge, you want them disengaged. You're trying to block everything. What you get instead? They brought the enemy flag and planted it right in front of your parliament. So congratulations. The youth is coming for you, and they're proving that the kids are all right. Sawadee ka.